Hi, hello, this is Laura Weller from Timeo-Performance in Actios Asia. Welcome to our trainer pool. This presentation is for you. It's Train the Trainer for the new intercultural trainers that we onboard. So the objectives of this session is to get you acquainted with our company, with our models and materials, and to get clear what we expect from our trainers. And first off, we chose you because of your intercultural business knowledge. So this trainer will take the assumption that you are familiar with cultural dimensions. So we will not go through the explanation of all the dimensions, but just show you which dimensions we have, those that you will use, and you will very likely recognize them from some of the other culture gurus. So as a trainer, you will be representing our brand, and as such, when you are with the client, you will be there as a Actios trainer, or when it's soft skills topics, you will be there as a Timeo-Performance trainer. So you will use our master slides, so the format and the fonts. And as for the intercultural topics, we request you to use the Nomad Profiler and our Cultural Dimensions framework. But besides those, we are very flexible, and we very much welcome the trainer to add their own materials, their own stories, anecdotes, cases. So it's like we provide the backbone, the model, the framework, and the questionnaire, so we can see the participant's position on the dimensions. But everything else we leave up to the trainer to fill. And of course, everything you add will be your own intellectual property. As for you representing us as a trainer and the slides and the materials, we only have one further request, and that is as for social media. Anything you want to post regarding the client engagement on LinkedIn or Facebook first needs to be accorded through us by the client. And when you post anything, then of course we would appreciate if you tag us in your post as well. The process of our trainings is as follows. Once we know the group and the participants, and sometimes of course it will be individual expat coaching, and other times it will be groups. Once we know, we will send out a pre-training questionnaire. And this will all be arranged by us, but you are free to review the questions and add anything that you would like to know. So this helps you to kind of customize it a bit to the request of the client and also the needs of the participants. So it deals with questions around intercultural challenges they have or things they would like to know. So this is sent out. It's a pre-training questionnaire. Next to that, we have, of course, the invitation to the Nomad Profiler. It's a 15-minute, as we call it, quiz to determine roughly where people are positioned on the dimensions, which will give a lot of insights to them and, of course, creates intercultural awareness regarding themselves. And you will be provided with this before you start the training, so it can help you to design. So the slide deck, as mentioned, you will receive the master slides. Some are mandatory, and I have mentioned it. I've put a note on the slides if it's mandatory, and for the rest you can delete or add if you like. And for quality purposes, we always like to review briefly before the training just to make sure that it's up to, it's consistent with what trainers usually create. Not too much text on one page. If the format and font is nicely done, spelling mistakes, so we can do that. And we usually provide the client with a workbook. And after this training, we will send you a sample of that. A workbook is used differently by trainers, sometimes really as a workbook, so that during the training you can make some exercises in it or make comments with certain slides. Others just prefer to use it as a reference. So it's a nicely binded set of your most important slides. So, of course, the cultural dimensions will be there, the iceberg, the perception wheel, and those slides that really provide some content for participants when they read back in this small booklet. We will do the printing. We suggest to not enter more than 50 slides. And we provide you, of course, with the participants list and all the logistics. So let's start now with the slides. So this is the cover page of our master slides. As you see, the box mandatory slide is positioned on this, so that you know which one you need to keep in. Please delete when you prepare your slide deck. So you change the title and you add the logo of the client, and of course you put your name as a facilitator and the date where it's taking place. Then we would like to present ourselves and our company to the participants, but usually we do not pay too much attention here. It's not about us, it's about the client at this point. But we would like to provide a bit of background on us. So I explain about Timeo-Performance being founded 10 years ago by our French managing directors who started out in recruitment and gained a lot of experience and expertise on recruiting local talent for international MNCs, mainly French companies. And then as a sort of one-stop shopping to many of their HR clients, they added training to their services. So not only recruiting the right talent, but also developing the workforce. Soft skills training like leadership, management skills, customer excellence, creating sales champions, and also coaching and consulting in the HR field. So naturally, our company realized that everything that they do is taking place in a very multicultural environment, and Singapore is the hub for the entire Southeast Asian region, or even the APAC region. Many companies coming to Singapore, many expats who are our clients coming to Singapore, don't only deal with a Singaporean local workforce, but also have a lot of vendors, clients and colleagues in the regions surrounding Singapore. So automatically, a lot of the recruitment was adapted to the big diversity of candidates, and the same for the trainings, multiple nationalities in the training room. So it was a very logical and organic step to start a joint venture with Actios France. And Actios is a European leader in intercultural management training. So together it created the joint venture Actios Asia, and that's the one you're representing doing this intercultural training. So I'm giving you the extended version of the explaining who we are. I do not expect you to do such a lengthy one, but people like this story as an introduction to the topic because it also makes us credible. We do our business in an intercultural environment that makes us as intercultural trainers very knowledgeable about the challenges that our clients face. So all of us, trainers, consultants, we have our own bio slide that we used to propose you to the client. If you like this as a sort of template to explain yourself, feel free to introduce yourself, feel free to enter it, but it's not mandatory. As you can see that there's no mandatory slide box there. It's a way to introduce yourself, but of course you can do as you like. So it's important to stress a bit of your education and especially corporate experience and international experience, studying, living, working in different countries. So here, this is a sample, of course, but usually we start with an objectives or aim of the day or the 2 days of the morning. This is another example to give you an idea, and we do mention that, you know, if they filled out the Nomad Cultural Profiler, that one of the objectives is to become more aware of our own working preferences and those of our colleagues based on that profiler. You can set out the agenda. And of course, when you're doing a one-on-one, if it's expat coaching with just an incoming or outgoing expat, then this can be very flexible and you can do it on the spot with your participant. So we start by setting the scene on cultural perception, and we have this lovely anecdote about research done. And let me tell you, because you're free to use it, and in the note pages you can find the entire story. So it's about research that was done in the 20s and later repeated in the 60s, where scientists put 5 monkeys in a cage, and in the middle of the cage was a ladder and on top of a banana. And of course monkeys like bananas, so before you know it, one of the monkeys would go up and climb up the ladder and try to get the banana. But before he reached, the researchers around them sprayed the monkeys with ice cold water. A second attempt by a second monkey was done. He was on his way on the ladder, but all of them were sprayed again with ice cold water, very uncomfortable. So when a third monkey tried to go up, the others pulled him down and beat him up, afraid for the cold water. A fourth attempt was made, again pulled down by the rest, beaten up, so at one point no one dared to go up the ladder. At that point, the scientists decided to swap one of the monkeys. So a new monkey went in, and not knowing what was going on, of course he saw the banana, so he walked up the ladder, but he was pulled down by the others. He tried again, but he was pulled down, beaten up, and he didn't dare to go up again. A second monkey was replaced. Of course the same thing happened. Immediately went up to get a nice bite of the banana, but before he reached, he was pulled down by the others, including the first replaced monkey, beaten up, and tried again, beaten up again. Then a third monkey came, did the same, pulled down, others beat him up. So this continued until all 5 monkeys were new. None of them experienced the cold water, and still none of them would go up to get the banana. So if they would be able to talk and we'd ask them, why are you not going up to get the banana? They would shrug their shoulders likely and say, well, that's just the way we do things around here. That's just the way we do things around here. No idea, but apparently we don't go up. It's just the way we do things around here. And this sentence has stuck with me and it's become the introduction to any culture course I give. It's just the way we do things around here. And it is that when we go into any international situation or any new company, we come in with preconceptions of this is the way people should work. This is the way business is done. This is the way we do things around here. And especially when you come from different nationalities and you come with your own glasses on and views of the world, that's where you run into difficulties, and that's where you get misunderstanding and confusion and frustration, and just realizing people apparently have different thoughts about how we are supposed to do things. So to create some safety in the room, we like to make the difference between stereotypes and generalizations, where stereotypes maybe a very superficial judgment, caricature that you hold on to judge other groups, other people, and new information kind of bounces off. Where generalization is more fact-based, based on research, and has a general application to a big part of that community. So that we decide or we agree to talk about generalizations, and also that when I talk about a Chinese or about a German, I'm not talking about that specific German person in my group or that specific Chinese person in my group. Because I do not know that person. They may have traveled the world, they may have lived in the US for 10 years. We are programmed on different layers, and we first need to get to know the person. But nationality is at least a starting point to explore the other person. So depending if you got a lot of input from the pre-training questionnaire, you can decide to do this exercise or not, but I think it always creates a really good opportunity to have a discussion about how we experience these cultural differences at work. So you just let people discuss either in group or individually, depends also how big the group is, that they discuss about something that they experienced during work, regarding ways of working that is different maybe from their colleagues, and write down the challenges. Once they've discussed, they write it down on a post-it. I stick it on the wall, and I have a very nice artwork of different concepts that people see around them. So, for instance, they talk about things related to hierarchy, or they talk about things related to indirect, direct communication. So I can already structure it according to the dimensions. So this is an exercise that I always do, which is also a bit of an icebreaker, where I ask the group to divide in two and ask them to close their eyes in turn. So you have to really make clear to them that they're group 1 or group 2, because they don't know if they have their eyes closed, which group you're pointing. So first you say, okay, everyone close your eyes. And no talking. Okay, group 1, open your eyes, look at the screen, don't say anything, just look what you see, and now close your eyes again. Okay, group 2, open your eyes, look at the screen, don't say anything, just look, see what you see, and close your eyes again. Now everyone, open your eyes, and again, look at the drawing. Close your eyes again. Everyone, close your eyes. Okay, you can open your eyes now, and I'd like to have a volunteer of each group. And you're going to make a drawing together. You're going to make just one drawing together. And very important rule is that you're not allowed to talk. So person from group 1 will start by drawing one line, and then a person from group 2 will add a line, and then group 1 will add a line. And you ask them to come to the front to a flip chart. And again emphasize that they should not talk. And it's funny because you may already understand what's going to happen. They're drawing from 2 different perspectives. They've been programmed to see different things. So they have been looking at the same picture, but still they see different things because I programmed them. So I stop the exercise once there's, confusion in their eyes, in their movements, or they're laughing, or the groups are laughing. I don't take it too far, just say at one point, okay, so that's enough, thank you, have a seat. And I say, okay, I'm going to ask a closed question first, so you're only allowed to say yes or no. And I'm asking the one volunteer from group 1, did you understand what the other person was drawing? And they may say yes or no. And I ask the same to the other person. And then I ask them, okay, so what was he or she, the other person, drawing? And then you find out that one is talking about a mouse and the other one is talking about a man or a hat or a face. You ask the entire group and they say, yeah, no, I just saw a rat or a mouse. No, we saw a face. Huh? How's that possible? So I'm going back to this picture, the combination, and suddenly they start to see it. And then, of course, I explained that I was tricking them and that I showed the first picture to group 1 and the complete right picture to group 2 and then the middle picture to both of them. And I managed to program them in 10 seconds to see things a certain way. So can you imagine, that's when I make the link to culture, I say, can you imagine how your 20 years of growing up in your family, in your country, has programmed you to see things a certain way? Or also having worked for 10 years in an American company or in a local traditional Singaporean company, has programmed you to see that as the way of working. And then I go to this slide, is how are we actually programmed? And this is a mandatory slide. And I give an explanation for all these factors. Right? So national background, in the end, is of course only one of them. But it is what the nomad profiler is focusing on. But it's not the truth. It's a starting point. Yeah? We can generalize about certain German behavior. We can generalize about certain French business behavior. We can generalize about typical Japanese business behavior. But then, of course, you still need to get to know the Japanese person you're dealing with, because if it's someone just out of university or a 50-year-old, so with a big generation gap, can make a very different impact on how they view the world. Or maybe they did an MBA in France. Or maybe they are married to an Italian. It shapes the way they see things. National background is a starting point. We go into the iceberg, mandatory. This needs probably no explanation, as this is one of the most important things that we explain when talking about culture. We judge the book by its cover. We judge that what we see above the water. But we need to find out what's under the water. We need to find out what are the true values and norms, beliefs, and the basic assumption that are actually driving our behavior, right? So behavior that we might see is that something I hear a lot here is maybe a British expat manager with a local Southeast Asian, let's say Indonesian team, asking them for their opinion or input or thoughts during a team meeting. There will likely not be much response. So you may judge by saying, oh, Indonesians are shy or they don't know. But by finding out their values, you learn about how they view hierarchy and how they view certain behavior or respect you need to show to a boss or a manager. You don't talk back against them in a group. You don't say no. It's common courtesy. So you need to understand what's the reasoning behind certain behavior and not judge it with your own glasses on. So we don't see the things as they are, is what Stephen Covey says, but as we are. This is a video that I let you see yourself. You can Google it on whodunit, or the URL is in the note pages. And don't want to spoil it. You can have a look and you can conclude what it can bring to this topic. It's not mandatory. This is definitely a mandatory slide. It's one of our main slides. It's the big learning point in preventing misunderstanding and mistrust. Is looking at the situation, you may feel emotions arise, you may feel annoyance, insult, or confusion, and you might judge things in a certain way. So take a step back and see what you really try to find different interpretations for the same situations. What do I really see and observe here? So, okay, they're not saying anything. Could there be a reason that my team is not giving me any feedback now? Yeah, so why am I surprised, shocked? What does it say about my values? So I'm Dutch, so in the Netherlands, even if you're just out of university and you're only 24 years old, you are supposed to put in your 2 cents. It shows your credibility. Everyone expects everyone to kind of speak up during a meeting and give their opinion. That's why meetings take overall so long in the Netherlands. So if that's what you are brought up with, then it will surprise and maybe annoy when people don't say anything during a meeting and don't give their input or opinions. Then you go to the third step. What could be the good intentions of the other person? So, not to let the manager lose face or my team. Yeah? So, the good intentions is to give to not challenge at that point publicly, but perhaps give your feedback one-on-one. Yeah? Or via a third person, maybe a trusted party in the team that is connected to the manager. So it's just different ways of getting to the same goal. When this slide I hardly use, and it depends. If you have a session with an expat and it's his first expatriation, this might be very good to explain. Okay, this slide introduces a part of the session when you're doing a one-on-one with an expat or spouse. This is where you can enter any background information about the country that they're going to, which is useful for the expat. We try not to spend too much time on things that they can also read in Lonely Planet or other travel guides. But it's of course those things that give insights into the values and norms of a country, and that we can eventually link to the business culture. Overall, our sessions with clients are considered to be intercultural business training. But of course, history, geography, economics, politics strongly influenced the way people think, the way people work. So this is usually where you can address that sort of information. And customs and traditions, and maybe give some tips on books or movies, websites, for the expat to get to know the country. Before introducing any values from the country that you were discussing, especially in group training, it's always nice to have the group think. If it's different nationalities, make smaller groups or even individuals, but have a moment and think about the 2 or 3 core values of your country that have influenced how you behave and work. And we can link that again to the cultural programming slide, all the external influences that make you who you are, of which country is one, or potentially region. So this is again the awareness part. So next to the fact that participants complete the Nomad Profiler and therefore can see their position on the 10 dimensions, this is also an exercise where they again think about and try to be more aware of what has shaped their thinking process, their values and their norms. So then we finally get to the cultural dimensions framework. And of course, Hofstede had 4, later 5, Trompenaars 7 dimensions, and Axios developed 10 dimensions, and 10 is a lot. So depending on the participants, the topic, the time that we have together, if it's 1 or 2 days or half a day, I usually select a couple of dimensions that make sense for that group, specific group. I do, because this is the Nomad Profiler as well, and where they can see their position, I do at least explain all the dimensions. So, and clearly state there's no good, no bad, no good or bad, right or wrong, but it gives insights into your values and norms. And then online on the Nomad, in the Nomad network, you can actually choose countries, the countries that you're working with, or maybe even your own country, and you can compare. So you have your own position on the dimension, and then you have the position of the country, let's say Singapore, next to it, and you can see how different you are, where you're very different, where there's a big gap, and then go into what can, where can we bridge, how can we bridge the gap, how can we connect the positions. So usually I give a quick overview of what they all entail. When I do a group training, I often ask in the group to actually create a big profile that we can put up on the walls. So put 3 flip chart papers in landscape, let one group do the blue dimensions, let one group do the purple dimension, let one group do the orange dimensions, and then you cut out smaller post-its or stickers and you let them put their name on it, and they can put themselves on the lines. And especially when you have an intact team as participants, it's very good for them to see where they are positioned towards their colleagues, how different they are, and then get to the thinking process that different is good, because that's where creativity arises, where you try to reconcile different perspectives, different viewpoints. So that's an exercise I always like, and also you can ask them to put some country positions on the wall as well, so they can see themselves with their colleagues and some of the countries that they're working in or doing business with. So that's actually the slide I use. And also I'll introduce the Nomad network, because everyone who has done the Nomad will have access for 12 months to the Nomad network, where as a trainer it's important to stress to your participants the wealth of information that you can find on there. There's country packages for 66 countries where it's not only things like geography, population, politics, but business, ethics, business processes and way of working regarding meeting, decision making, negotiations, giving feedback. A lot of very useful information. So the training is not the end of it. They have a year to go back to their profile, compare with countries, and look up any profiles, which is interesting if they are venturing into new countries, having new business regions to attend to. So that's indeed the slide where I explain that. And this is so these are not this one is not mandatory, as you can see. There's not a mentioning of mandatory slide. This is just to show them how it works when they have their own profile and they compare it with the country of interest. Business cases, of course, always very interesting. This is just an example, but that could introduce the topic of the dimensions. So here's the first dimension, and every dimension is structured in this way. So 4 slides. So I go back to the beginning. This is the slide where we explain the dimensions, so the difference of the 2 sides. This is the slide where we show the country position, and that makes for interesting discussion. And often I highlight those countries of the participants. For example, we are in Singapore, so I put Singapore in. Maybe it's a German expat, so I put Germany and Singapore. And in case they're working for an American company, it's interesting to put USA in. Or they have a country-specific interest like China, so you already highlighted for them. There's an Excel that's linked to the PowerPoint slide, so you just click on it and you can delete countries or highlight countries or add, but most of them, these are all the countries also in the Nomad network that are represented. So after that, you can, this is something that I usually don't keep in. This is for me to remind myself how to explain the difference and how this will influence business. And I will add, of course, anecdotes. That works best. Anecdotes of own experiences, anecdotes of stories from books or other trainers that you've heard. And this is, again, thinking about the implications of this dimension. So these 2 slides are mandatory. This is optional and mainly giving support for the trainer. So again, this one, countries, and I use this exercise for this particular dimension, and this sets the stage for discussing the rest of the dimensions. I ask, of course it's different if you have a one-on-one or a group, but I ask the groups to think of advantage and disadvantage of both sides. So you go to one side of the dimension, so strictly versus according to the situation, strictly is following the rules, following procedures, standardization, rule-driven versus, case-by-case assessment, flexible to the situation, and you ask the group, so what are the advantages? So you first stay on the left and you say, what are the advantages of strictly following procedures, being rule driven? And then, but what if you take it to the extreme, if you would be only rule driven? And we do the same for the other side. So on the left side, for instance, it's standardization, it's clarity, everyone knows what to do, it's predictable. But taken to the extreme, it can lead to, how do you say, bureaucracy. It's not there's no room for creativity and innovation. And if you go to the other side, then you see actually it's offsets the left below box, because according to the situation, acting according to the situation leads to innovation, creativity, adaptation to the customer. But taken to the extreme, it leads to chaos, and everyone's doing their own thing, and a lot of reinventing the wheel. So how values come to us, it's if you take one country on the left side, the Germans would say, oh, we're so consistent and we're clear and reliable, and those Chinese, they're so chaotic and unreliable, and sometimes it feels like there's nepotism, where the Chinese say, hey, we are flexible and we are responsive to the client, and at least we take a personal approach. And those Germans, they're so bureaucratic, rigid, impersonal, even cold. So you see that there's negatives to both sides, but we tend to only see the negatives of others, where they differ, and then we prefer our way of working. But we need to think about what it brings. And that's the way to approach cultural diversity. Know your own strengths, be aware of your preferences and your strengths, but also really open up to the way other people work, and really take a step back and see what it actually can bring to your approach, what it can bring to the team, what it can bring to the organization. So it's about respecting others' values and actually appreciating it and reconciling with your own way of working. So it's not my way or the highway. It's also not fully adapting to the other's culture or finding a meager compromise, but going for the reconciliation. And often in business, headquarters, French, German headquarters, they go abroad, they go into Asia, they go into Africa, and they just want to continue doing things the way they are doing things back home. And if it works here, why shouldn't it work in Singapore? Well, different market, different relationships, different way of dealing with clients, with suppliers, with colleagues, different structures and cultures in general. And that needs to be taken into account, because you don't want to lose your clients. You don't want to lose the long-term relationships with your vendors. And that's why often companies talk about third culture. So the best of headquarters, taking the best of the local approach and create it into a third culture. And this is adapted from Nancy Adler. So it's about building a high-performing third culture, which is right top, cultural collaboration, leveraging the differences. So this is again the slide that belongs to the applying the rules dimension with the implications on it. So the third dimension is about individual versus group, and the individual is where the individual's focus, interest, needs are more important than the group, the family, the community. It's all about individual accountability and responsibility versus I am part of a group And it's about the group's needs and interests, and we talk about common responsibility. And of course, it's often a combination of both, but you can imagine that the USA is very much on the left side. And countries like Indonesia are very much on the right side. So you can have a look again at the positions of the countries, and you can approach again this with the advantages on both sides and taking it to the extreme. You can imagine the left, the individual focus. If you take it to the extreme, it leads to egoism, egocentrism, and on the right side, you may lose out on the individual's skills and strength. Also, too much compliance, piggyback riding. There's disadvantages to the extreme position on both sides of the dimensions. So these are different approaches which can help you prepare your training. You can think about what does it do with bonuses. How do you go to negotiations? Does one person have the mandate from the entire company? You could just go by yourself, or do you go with a group? This is a very French dimension. It's about how you are getting to a conclusion, and the French are very much on the right side, the theoretical side, where you start first with the theory and then kind of deduct to fact, the conclusion. It's all about logical thinking and testing the hypothesis. Versus on the left side, what matters most is the facts. So looking at a new car, you could say on the left side, well, you know, the car is driving very well. Therefore, you know, this is successful. Versus on the other side, the car has been built exactly right, following the research that was done, so it should be working, so it should be right. And this is the positioning. You can find more information on Nomad Network about these dimensions and explanations. Yeah, so I said it wrongly, or no, I said it correctly. Deductive is more theoretical and inductive is empirical. So on the left, it's based on concrete evidence, and on the right, it's based on compelling logic. And the French are very different here from other countries. They're very much on the theoretical side. And that also influences, for instance, how you give your presentation and during a meeting, how your argumentation is, your style of negotiation. Time management, very clear one, that comes back in other cultural dimension frameworks as well. So do you have a very planned approach where, you know, 9 o'clock meeting is 9 o'clock, and if it finishes at 10, then it should finish at 10 because you have subsequently planned more meetings? Or do you have a more flexible approach around time? Also, those are societies that are more into multitasking, so less sequential, chronological time planning, but more effective, flexible around certain tasks. The position of the countries, again, difference and how it influences business. Risk-taking, don't spend too much time on that, also comes back another dimension framework. Very high risk takers or a more moderate approach in society, and how does it influence business? This is one of the more important ones, professional relationship, where task-centric is a more rational approach toward business. Also, when you do in negotiations or new building relationship, new deals, there's much more focus on the books, on the business, and then a personal fit or building on building a relationship, where on person-centric societies, it's very important to build trust. Not so much on the books, but on a personal fit and a feeling that you can trust each other and that you're in for it for a longer time and not just one-off. So building kind of a long-term partnership. There's also more of a more interconnection between one's private and personal life. These are the differences and how it influences business. Yes, so this slide we always show. Do we build trust based on facts and figures and then maybe have a more personal relationship, more friendly, or do you start first with business on a personal level and look for a personal fit and then build on that, seeing the actual expertise and knowledge? The link is in the slide. A very nice video from Harvard Business Review, from Aaron Meyer's book, regarding the yes and no, where yes, saying some cultures saying yes, it doesn't necessarily mean a true yes. It could be a no or a maybe. And this introduces nicely the topic of communication, where of course on one side we have explicit communication, where you say what you mean and you mean what you say. So the message is literally put into words. Where on the right side, the message is implied. Depending on the sensitivity of the topic, less words are spent on the message and more is also given by nonverbal communication or the way you say it. And this is all about preserving relationship. So it's also strongly linked to the task, person-centric dimension, where if you, the person, is disconnected from the job, it's easier to be direct because you don't say anything about the person. If it's more overlapping, you maintain harmony, prevent loss of face, which is prevalent in many Asian countries, by implying a message, so giving an indirect message. This I spend a lot of time on. This is one of the most important dimensions where that impacts the cultural differences and where misunderstandings arise. So it can influence a lot of aspects of culture. This is all not mandatory, but there's a lot of exercises here that can help people see the difference, and also mainly when you're dealing with a Western audience, how they can communicate more implicit. Then, of course, touch on the topic of nonverbal communication. So many anecdotes you can give for all these bullet points. And then we give another reconciliation of this. So on the one hand, if you're very explicit communicator, you maybe give a very clear message, but it can be razor sharp for the interlocutor. And on the other side, implicit, you maintain a warm relationship, but if you're not clear enough, without direction and meaning. So it's all about the reconciliation of embedding a clear message in a respectful, empathetic relationship. So these are ways of reconciling that. And this slide, have a careful look. It's to help people think of when it's appropriate to use email, when they should really make an effort to pick up the phone, or when they should actually ask for budget to have a face-to-face meeting. So it all has to do with context poor, context rich, how you communicate and with what tool. I often use this with remote teams. The second last dimension is dispute resolution, which is also very much influenced by the difference that France has towards other countries. Where on the left side, the French, they're more confrontational in discussions, where they stand up for one's opinions at all cost, and that's the French grew up with learning to debate, learning to challenge, with the purpose of finding the best solution and really analyzing the situation. And this sometimes comes across for other cultures as very challenging, questioning, probing, where the good intention is just to get to the bottom of things. So on the other side are those countries that take a more of a consensus approach. So these are the differences. As you can see, France is almost at the left. And these are the difference between the dimensions, again, and the impact of culture. And the last dimension is the expressing emotions, where on the left side we have the self-controlled Japanese with almost like a poker face, where you don't see what they really think. And on the other side, the Italian, exteriorized, very much expressing anger or happiness in not only their face but also their bodily expression. So, having discussed all dimensions, I never discussed them necessarily sequentially. It's more that they come up during the discussions and during the exercise and during the challenges of the participants. So I usually check at the end to see if all the questions and challenges of the participants have been answered. I ask them to think about key takeaways. Team charter is more when you're dealing with the intact team. You can have them think in a group the best, so decide on how to, the purpose of meetings and how to make decisions and how to give feedback to each other. Remind everyone again about the Nomad Online and the information they can find on the network, and preferably end with them writing down their own action plan, which could be as simple as what will you start to do, what will you continue to do, and what will you stop doing relating to what you've learned today. So these are the key learnings, the perception wheel. This is the team charter I spoke about, which can give you something to work with a true team. This is the reminder about the Nomad network. This is the action plan, and for any further information, these are the contact details. Thank you very much for listening to me this past hour, or maybe a 1.5 hour in total. And all the best, good luck with your preparation, and of course you can always reach out to one of our team members with any questions that you may have. All the best.